Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome also to our online delegates. Welcome to Session 4. Session 4 is entitled California's Collective Momentum Towards Realising Inclusion, Belonging and a Family-Sustaining Wage. This session brings together representatives from multiple segments of the state, regional and local levels in Californian education, a vital collaboration to lay the foundation for persons with disabilities as included, contributing and employed members of community and the US democracy. Please welcome Kristen Wright, Sacramento County Office of Education, Victoria Graff, Loyola Marymount University, and Dr. Shauna Draxton, Wish Community and Academy Schools. There will be an opportunity to ask questions after the presentation. Before I hand over, just a few housekeeping rules. You'll all be familiar with it, so if everyone could please mute your mobile phones. Bathrooms are located on this floor. If you go out the door, turn left. They're down the corridor past the escalators and on the left-hand side. In the unlikely event of an emergency situation occurring, please follow the instructions of the venue staff, who will direct you to the nearest exit and safe assembly point. Please follow any instructions given over the PA system as well in the event of an emergency. For wheelchair users, venue staff will direct you to the nearest fire evacuation lift, and another member of the venue staff will be there to accompany you in the lift and out to the nearest safe assembly point. On each level there are 2 refuge points, one on each end of the corridor, along with evacuation chairs which your staff are trained in the use of in case of emergency. I now hand over to the panel to deliver their session, California's Collective Momentum Towards Realising Inclusion, Belonging and a Family-Sustaining Wage.
Thank you and good afternoon. It is my great honor to be here with you all, and I am happy to open up in representation of our very large and mighty state of California that is trying to do the good work towards realizing a family-sustaining wage for individuals with disabilities. I'm Kristen Wright. I'm coming to you from Sacramento, California. That's the capital of California, and we invite you to come. Any of you are always welcome, so look me up. And I am here as, first and foremost, the parent of a young woman with disabilities and complex needs. Her name is Shelby, and she's gone through the public education school system in California. The first 5 grades of her life, she was at a home hospital program because I had not ever visualized what inclusion looked like as a mother. Once I went to visit a school, one very similar to the one you'll hear about later today, I understood what it looked like for a person with complex support needs to receive their education with their peers. And so after 5th grade, Shelby became a fully included student at a school that only had inclusive education. And she graduated from there at the age of 22 into supported employment. I also failed to mention that in my role at the Sacramento County Office of Education, I am the Executive Director of Equity and Prevention and Intervention. I did come from the California Department of Education, where I spent the previous 4 years as California's State Director of Special Education. So in California, we have a lot of people, and we are responsible currently of 13% of the gross domestic product in the United States of America, which means to me that you should have a lot of jobs for every person who works there, and a family-sustaining job. Our population is almost 40 million. And in our public schools, we currently have almost 700,000, we have almost 700,000 students with disabilities in a 6 million student scenario. Our students speak many languages. Of those who speak other languages, 28% of them speak Spanish. And then there are hundreds of other languages that are also spoken. So a few years ago, California started dreaming, and I would say it was probably just after we saw the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act come into play, where we really got serious, and it really gave us the backdrop to be able to start having these deeper conversations about what it would look like. We really started dreaming about how our agencies could work together, and we were also legislated to work together, and I would say that always helps. So I don't have to tell any of you that we have a complex set of challenges that we're working with. And I heard a couple presentations earlier today from other countries, and it sounds like there are very much similarities across the world in terms of the challenges we're facing. And the common thread I heard was mindset and ableism. So our low rates of inclusion in our kindergarten through 12th grade, currently we're, as a state, around 56% of our students with disabilities spend 80% or more in general education with their peers. That's a metric that's under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is our federal act that we measure. Our goal that was just adopted for California in this past November is that in the next 3 years, we have 70% of our students with disabilities spending 80% or more of their time in general education. Now, a 16% or 14% increase may not seem like a lot, but it is a lot when you consider over the past decade, we've only gone up 1 percentage point a year. And that's a lot of kids. So we saw opportunities for change on our horizon. Those federal policy changes were really important that we could map to, allowing us to really look at competitive integrated employment and a blueprint. We decided to have a task force on special education in California that really looked across all the realms, whether it was early education or teacher preparation. We looked across everything, and the task force came out with a report in 2015, and at the end of this presentation, if you do download it, we've put all these resources that we'll be talking about if you want to take a look at them, the task force report and some of the other things that we've done recently. But this task force really laid out some things that needed to change, and sometimes those kind of task force, that information sits on a shelf, and there was a hope that this would not. What's happened is our policymakers in California have really taken that task force report and used it as a roadmap to make legislative changes across the board. So we have a lot of will right now. We're now just working on the way. So like I said, the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act really helped us in California create the California Competitive Integrated Employment Blueprint, and you'll be able to look at that online as well. And it really helped our stars to start aligning. And so policymakers, in my previous role as State Director of Special Ed, I started working really closely with the Department of Rehabilitation, with our Department of Developmental Services, with our policymakers, and our governor's office, to really think about all the things we needed to do to attack this complex issue, and all with the common goal of bettering the lives of individuals with disabilities. What we realized is that in order to change the trajectory, we really had to backward map all the way into early intervention, and at the very least preschool, age 3, which is when students end up coming into our education system. And if we didn't start changing the mindsets and opportunities there, we would not see a long-term change. So California, over the last 2 years, and this year in particular, are putting billions of dollars into early childhood education, and with requirements that they be all inclusive. And if the legislation that we're currently trying to enact goes into effect, it would require that 10% of all state preschool funded programs have space for children with disabilities. In the past, there were no percentages attached to that. So a lot of the children in preschool would go to a separate preschool and start off in segregated settings. So this is a dear friend, Joe Xavier, who was planning to hopefully be with us today, but he's with us in spirit and video. He was not able to come to the conference in person, but he did want to send a message, and he has been instrumental in mapping and working with our business community and our policymakers to ensure that we all know what we're mapping to, and that is competitive integrated employment, that is working towards a family sustaining wage, and not just getting a job, but getting a job that can help you realize whatever your dreams and goals are. So I'll go ahead and kick it off to my help over there. Thank you.
California, the United States, and whatever we've done around the world. I am Joe Xavier, the Director of the Department of Education in California. I'm also in disabilities and California. I want to start by acknowledging the Harkin Institute disability they're doing these conversations all. And certainly all of you are making the time to come together and part of such an important conversation. To the leadership, thank you for creating this space and place during the important conversation. Individuals with disabilities today have 7% unemployment. That is 13 years after the passage of the American Vehicle and the United States. Today, even if it's the rest of California, we still have individuals with significant disabilities working in shelter, workshops, and such settings. The workforce innovation in 2014 reflected a shift in society expectation. It pushed the better along person. And ensured competitive and regular employment is the expectation. It also made vocational rehabilitation, meaning with disabilities to have them better prepared for. How have we pursued an effective and creative One is partner of the California Department of Education, with our California government services, and we developed the blueprint to bring in some relationship. During that time, we had an opportunity to pursue the director of special education. And I said to Chris that we need to do an advanced competitive. And she looked back and said, we need everyone to earn our families That began a friendship and a partnership that has taken on competitive employment across all systems. It included us going way upstream by the 12 system, and engaging on an ultimate for individuals with disabilities so they have better access a family sustained means that the conversation and expectations start at the early stage of childhood. It means that giving everyone's responsibility, social services, medical services, educational, workforce, and yes, the family. COVID-19 showed us there are a lot of gaps in our services. But they're also demonstrated how much opportunity exists. Things such as working from home or working from anywhere will expand the job market and the opportunities for disabilities. We believe in the talent and potential individuals with disabilities. We believe that everyone is supposed to experience and will engage in and we leave no one behind, no exception. Employment is a help is the opportunity and each can be contributing members of society. Congratulations on the successful conference.
Most of you know, I think, what competitive integrated employment that was mentioned earlier. It's real work for real pay in the real world. And California is excited to continue on that journey. We definitely have the commitment across all of our sectors. I do want to mention before I pass it off that we do have a lot of policy shifts happening. We have a lot of focus on inclusion right now, but I will put a little pin in the fact that we also recognize that there are disability types that do want to have more specialized settings and that do need that for their language needs. And so when I say all children in a general ed setting, I realize that does not mean every single one, and that I in individualized truly means individualized. And we have put a great deal of funding as well into our social emotional learning, and we're working closely with our departments of mental health and health services to really do that whole child approach that Joe was talking about. Just a few other statewide policy changes that you can see. A couple that I'll highlight that are relative to this backward mapping to employment are a work group that just published recommendations around a statewide IEP, individualized education plan template, for a more person-centered, person-driven, employment-focused approach to education in the K-12 setting, and also an alternate diploma pathway work group that made recommendations that all individuals, regardless of the level of support need they have or their disability, should be able to earn a regular high school diploma. And that is currently not the case in California. We have a lot of individuals with significant disabilities who are earning certificates of completion. And we heard from our partners at Department of Rehab that is not what they need in order to get employment. You can't get in the door a lot of places when you don't have a valid high school diploma in California. Finally, I think hopefully we would all agree that we can have a lot of policy changes and a lot of hopes and dreams, but in K-12 education, it comes back to the teacher and the teacher feeling well prepared and coming into teaching, understanding who they're teaching. And in California, we've had kind of a separate teacher education system, the special ed system of learning to be a teacher and the general ed system. We've worked really hard with some of the leadership of Dr. Victoria Graf to change that, to create all new credentials and a new vision for our teachers, because we know that we want to make sure that our teachers are very well prepared in order to meet the needs of all students. So thank you for listening, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Graf.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's great to be back in Belfast, and I see some of my homies out there, and I'm really thrilled to be back in Belfast. I guess my first experience in Belfast was over 10 years ago at an inclusion conference at Queen's University, Belfast. Some of you may know Tony Gallagher, who was dean there, and he had a session and actually a conference on inclusion, and really just inspired me so much to keep coming back, and I feel like it's almost my second home. And I've been able to invite both Dr. Draxton and Kristen Wright to come to Belfast and to visit some of the schools here and to see some of the great work. And I have to say, this has been a really reciprocal relationship between the U.S. and Los Angeles and California and Northern Ireland. We have a lot to learn from you here. I know you have a lot of work going on with school collaboration and shared education, integrated education. You've got lots of different models, and I think we can learn from each other, and we actually have a memorandum of understanding with Queen's University and Loyola Marymount University, where I am a professor, actually now professor emeritus, and so we look forward to continuing the relationship with Belfast and Northern Ireland, and internationally as well. We had the pleasure of going to Tel Aviv a few years ago for an international conference on disability. So we like to see the world and share what we're doing and also learn from everyone as well. But I want to just call out Kristen's leadership. It really took someone at the state level with a vision as to what is possible in terms of having one system of education for all pupils. All means all. And we're coming from a very siloed system in California, but Kristen, not only because she is an amazing educator and leader, but also a parent, and who knows the system and knows what her vision is and what the dream was. And we also had the leadership from three very outstanding educators in our field, Linda Darling-Hammond, for those of you who know the work internationally that Linda Darling-Hammond has done, and also our California Commission on Teacher Credentialing and our State Board of Education. So it took all three of those major systems to come together to talk to each other. And we had this state task force that did a 360 review of everything that touched children with disabilities. We looked at financing, we looked at early childhood, we looked at educator preparation, we looked at, what else would I leave out? There were about 4 or 5 different areas, and so we did a 360, because so often I think, at least in the US, and maybe it's the same elsewhere, agencies weren't talking to each other. And so my work as a teacher educator was with the California Commission on Teacher Education, and so I had the privilege of being on the state task force, working with numerous other entities to try and be able to make sure that our system was changing. Now, change takes time. I've heard this quote that the only person who or the only individual who likes change is a baby with a wet diaper. So, you know, system change takes time. But we've, I think, accomplished quite a bit, but we still have a lot of work to do in terms of changing the mindset. And changing the mindset of some of our teachers is really one of the starting points, especially with some of the more senior teachers, many of whom came into the field of special education saying, I want my separate classroom just with my 10 or 12 pupils, and those are the kids that I want to work with. I wasn't prepared to work with students without disabilities. And then you have your teachers who are teachers in mainstream who say, I wasn't prepared to work with students with disabilities. They'd be better served over here in special education. Well, that no longer is the case. We're changing dramatically what we're doing in terms of our expectations and our standards so that our new teachers, our new candidates coming in will be able to contribute in a very different way. But I think for our senior teachers, our more experienced teachers, it's a matter of fear. It's a matter of not having interactions with students with disabilities. It's coming from a perspective of low expectations. And I think a lot of that is driven by the disability labels that we use, so that if you say a student with Down syndrome is coming into your mainstream classroom, they'll go, oh, well, I can't teach that student. I don't know anything about Down syndrome. They're not going to be capable of reading and writing and going on. So we have to change a lot of those low expectations and be able to provide a new mindset. So you can see here in terms of kind of the vision of what we're really working towards is promoting that one system of education, but also providing support for teachers. We're doing a lot with our clinical field work so that our candidates for the future are getting into the classroom early on to be able to see what is possible. But we also need to, as the focus of this particular conference on employment, I always would say to my teacher candidates, what is life going to be like for the kids that you're teaching now when they leave post-primary, or what we call high school? What's going to happen to them? And then you heard that statistic of 70% of students or of individuals with disabilities being unemployed. So I would share that statistic with my future teachers and say, okay, well, how can we change that? We have to start in nursery. We have to start in the primary level to start having students think about careers, thinking about self-determination, self-advocacy. What is it they want to grow up and be able to do? So employment is really important that our teachers be able to understand that. Obviously, these inclusive opportunities, and then to help our teachers know that they can be agents of change in working to make all of this happen. So we do have new expectations. In fact, now that I'm no longer a program administrator, I've left it to some of our junior colleagues to institute a brand new program that is starting this summer for our new candidates coming out, where they will experience a common set of expectations with general education teachers as well as with special education teachers. So there's a huge paradigm shift. And I have to say, it's our younger candidates who are coming in that are able to really think beyond what they've experienced even in their education. And so they say, well, sure, why not? If you give me the support and you give me the training, we can do this. They're very proactive in that regard. As Kristen mentioned about this IEP, new IEP that's coming out, it's going to be, student-centered, in many cases student-led, and that's one of the benefits of WISH schools, where they're planning, they're team planning. The students actually help lead that. Instead of us as the adults, it's really empowering the students to say, what is it that I hope to be and what I would like to do and what my education should look like. So we're not trying to get away from this. In fact, I saw something on Twitter, for those of you, I'm on Twitter if you want to follow me, to get rid of this term special needs. And because that really feeds into our ableist, perspectives. And so we have this new language now in California that all students are general education or mainstream students. It just means that some students may need some additional support through this individualized IEP. But all students, in fact, Liz Neal, some of you may know Liz Neal College up in Londonderry. And so their Senko, when a student comes in with a disability, he automatically puts them into a mainstream classroom to begin with. Not into a special education classroom, but into the mainstream, and then sees what levels of support that student needs in order to be successful. And maybe they do need to be withdrawn on occasion, but the concept is put them into general education and then go from there. So as you can see, we have these new standards. We're really trying to emphasize universal design for learning, which is a framework for teachers, all educators actually, to be able to provide universal access for all students, regarding if they're English language learners, if they're students with disabilities, or they're gifted, and so forth. So universal design for learning has been one of the cornerstones. So these are some of the new titles that we have. So we've shifted away from a disability focus. So in the past, we were preparing our teachers to work, and we use the term learning disability differently here in the US than you do in the UK specifically. So it would be a specific learning disability, I think, as opposed to a student with an intellectual disability. But we're getting away from a disability label focus to a level of support. Because if you take a student, for example, with autism, that's a whole continuum. So if you just had a classroom for students with autism, you've got such diversity in terms of the level of support. So you have to look individualized at each student and then be able to provide that individual support. So these are some of the new labels that we have. So transition is a new concept in some ways for our general education candidates. The special education or education specialists are more prepared with this notion of transition. And by transition, I mean leaving post-primary, leaving school, and being prepared for work or for university or college opportunities. Typically, it starts at age 16, where you develop, again, it's a team that comes together. Oftentimes, it can be as early as 14. But why start at 14? Why not start at age 6? You can start in primary as well to start having those conversations. But you can see some of the elements and sort of the outcomes from an individualized transition plan, and that goes along with this IEP that Kristen was talking about as well. So it's a very comprehensive plan. And so this is a new role for our general education candidates in the mainstream to be able to be knowledgeable about what transition is. And so this is a standard that would be used for all of our candidates, whether they're what we call education specialists or general education teachers, so that they start to become more familiar with this notion of transition leading, in this case that we're talking about today, about employment. So this would be a standard for all teachers. And then I've given some examples of, again, areas for transition and employment for our educators that work with students with more mild to moderate support needs as well. I'm not going to read those to you, and I think you'll have access to this PowerPoint on the website, so you can see some of the new language. But it took a long time for us to get to this point, and it really was the outcome of that 2015 statewide task force report. So that's 7 years for this to become a reality. So as I said, change does not happen quickly, but we were persistent, and we had a lot of state leaders that were willing to put the time in, and we had different work groups to be able to do it. And then we also have the standards for our candidates who are working with students with more extensive support needs. Obviously, this is a critical area for us as well. So again, you can kind of skim that and then look at it in more detail. But the reason I'm sharing this is so that you can see that all of our subgroups, in terms of, so we kind of walk in two worlds, I have to say. While at one point we're trying to get away from disability labels, we do have some areas, especially in the area of what we call low incidence disabilities. So this would be in what we call deaf and hard of hearing, or candidates or students with visual impairments and so forth. So I just wanted to give some examples as well in the areas of the expectations, in this case for deaf and hard of hearing, for visual impairments, and I think that's it. So, so I just want to say I'm so proud to be a part of this team with the state leadership that we've had here with Kristen. And then I also, in full disclosure, I'm on the board of this school that you're going to hear about, which I think is an international model. In fact, maybe Shauna can talk about how many visitors have come to see this school that starts at age 4 all the way up to age 18, that is fully inclusive. And so we've had, I know, been able to participate with Shauna and visitors from Japan to the UK, Ireland to different countries in Europe. And so we invite you to come to Los Angeles, especially maybe during January, February, depending on what your weather is like at that time. But you're more than welcome to come, and we're also happy to answer any questions that you have, in my case, about teacher preparation. So, Dr. Draxton.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here and to be a part of this panel with Vicki and Kristen. It's been fantastic learning from folks this morning, and as Vicki mentioned, we've gotten to visit many schools to look at all of the wonderful things that you're doing in Belfast, and we're just really thrilled to be a part of this conversation. I get to do the work as a school leader because of the incredible work that Kristen does at the state level in terms of shaping policy with partners, and because of the work that Vicki has done with teacher educators. And as Vicki mentioned, she is on our board, and she did help found WISH. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that. But as I get started in sharing about WISH, I just wanted to let you know there are many types, just like here and around the world, there are many types of schools in Los Angeles and in California. There are public schools and private schools. The school I'm going to describe today is a public charter school. So we have a few more autonomies, but it is funded by the state, and it is free and available to all pupils. As described, it's independently run. So we get to identify our own mission and vision and targets, and we have to demonstrate that we are having performance outcomes that are the same or greater than the adjacent traditional public schools. So every year we have to go before our LAUSD, or Los Angeles Unified School District, and prove that we are making gains and outcomes for all pupils according to our mission and vision. So the philosophy at WISH is that all students are raised in an atmosphere of caring and belonging, with a group of professionals that are working together with meaningful and engaging instruction using evidence-based strategies. I'm going to take a moment to share how WISH was founded. So about 14 years ago, we're going into our 15th year next year, we had a group of moms who each had a child with significant support needs, and they had had very successful experiences in private as well as public preschools. Their children had been fully included, and they had seen great outcomes in terms of language development and academic achievement, and now it was time for them to go into the traditional educational journey of TK through 12, or the age 4 all the way up to age 18. And they tried to go to the schools in their neighborhood and the schools across the city, and they were turned away repeatedly, and they were sad and disappointed, and they didn't know what to do because they had had such a great preschool experience. So they turned to researchers and policymakers and said, please help us continue this inclusive education journey. And they were willing to. And so we wrote a charter and had it approved by the district, and we're able to ensure that all students could come to our local public school and be fully included at natural proportion. So I'm going to take the next 5 or 6 minutes to share with you some of the key tenets of our schools that make the inclusivity possible and what we believe is successful. These are our core tenets. These are all from researchers who have studied inclusive education, and so we really built our charter around these things. We commit to a small class size, and for us that means about 24 pupils. I'm not sure if that's bigger or smaller than what you're experiencing in your settings, but we like to target around 24 pupils. In each of those classrooms, we have 1 to 2 students who would be identified as having extensive support needs. And then we subscribe to a constructivist approach to learning, so we spend a lot of time ensuring that the activities that students are involved in are meaningful and engaging. We have strong family partnerships. We have a university partnership, and we spend time with other educators across the United States as well as globally, sharing practices and refining and improving ours based on what we learn from others. We subscribe to co-teaching and collaboration. We believe this work is really important and hard and urgent, and that we need to have conversations with other folks who care deeply about the progress of children. And so co-teaching and collaboration is really necessary for that to happen. And we embrace all students. We believe that they do best when they are together, and every student who walks through the door who wants to come, as long as they get in through the natural lottery process, is able to come. This is our structure. So we have about 3 classes per grade level. In our secondary school, we have about 125 pupils per our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. It's actually our newest school. As I mentioned, it's a lottery. It's a lottery because we have more students who want to attend than we're allowed to attend. So right now we have, at our TK through 8, we are allowed to serve 744 students. We just had our lottery about 3 weeks ago, and we already have about 1,100 students on our wait list. There's our belt schedule. You can see that the younger students go to school a shorter amount of time, and the older students are there for a longer portion of the day. Our newest school, the Academy, we've spent a lot of time really listening to those students and ensuring that the transition practices that Vicki and Kristen described are in place early and often, so that we can ensure that when pupils graduate, they have access to the workspaces and the vocational programs that they're interested in going to. They have all of the same tenets that our primary school has. So still co-teaching and collaboration, still really strong family partnerships, our university partnership, our small class size, and co-teaching and collaboration. This is a message we share with our families from the very outset. We spend a lot of time talking about our purpose, and our purpose really is to help all children from the very beginning see the value in one another, so that as they become adults, like us in this room, they can create workspaces and community places that value and support and integrate all folks. I just want to say, this is one of my most favorite pictures. We have a lot of pictures, but you can see in this picture all of the diversity that one might find in a classroom in Los Angeles, right? We have diversity of religion, diversity of race, diversity of ability level, and you can see all of those structures can be in place in a traditional classroom. Folks do not need to go to another location to have access to these tools. We really believe that there is reciprocal benefit for each individual in our classrooms, that students with disabilities are learning from their same age, typical developing peers, and students without disabilities are also making huge gains by being integrated into a classroom with students with disabilities. We also have students who are highly gifted in our classrooms. We like to say, if you just took a pie plate and threw it over the neighborhood behind you and scooped up all the children that were the same age and welcomed them into school, you could find them in that classroom learning together and building a community together so that they can run a community as they become adults. Thanks to the hard work of folks like Vicki and Kristen, we have a lot of educators who come in with a mindset prepared to serve all pupils. But folks often say, where do you get these teachers? Do you have special teachers? Do you have special training? I would say, no, we are fortunate to have well-trained teachers who come from local universities, but also from the outset, we make a commitment to uphold this framework, that we believe that every single student belongs in our schools, that there's an expectation that they will all learn and be challenged, that we need to do this together through collaboration, that we will continue to define and refine our supports, that our partnerships with families are welcome and expected, and that the excellence that we can provide in free public education is necessary and should be available to all. One of our tenants, family partnerships, is really important to us. As educators, we have a lot of expertise in how to teach young people how to read and how to do math, and we spend a lot of time looking at data and closing gaps. But it's just as essential to have those families at the table. They are really the most invested in the outcomes for their own children. So we spend a lot of time inviting families in and listening to their dreams and their expectations and adjusting what we do so that we can serve children well and aligned with where parents see their kids going. As mentioned, we have our university partnership, which makes it really nice. We get a lot of fieldwork students and student teachers in place. We also have a lot of folks observing what we're doing as practitioners and questioning it, and that helps us refine our supports and our responsibilities to students. Our teachers co-teach together, so they are not each in the classroom together all day long, but the way we do structure it is we have, I mentioned earlier that we have 3 classes per grade level, so if you're looking at the second and third grade classes, that would be 6 general ed teachers, and then we would have 1 special ed teacher who partners with those 6 general ed teachers and has specific times where they are scheduled to go into the classrooms. We also have all the other specialists co-teach together. So the music teacher and the general ed teacher co-teach together, as well as the occupational therapist and so forth. Everybody participates in an activity called daily debriefing. And what that means is at the end of the day, we sit in small circles around tables like you have right here, and we share a success, a challenge, and action for serving kids better the next day. That is one of our signature research-based practices, and I would say that the teachers really enjoy it. We don't allow any crosstalk at that time, but you just really get to listen to where everyone is with the support and programming for students, and then later as we walk away, we can go ahead and ask each other questions. All of our service providers integrate their service into the general education classroom. So our OT provides her service in the classroom, the language and speech therapist and so forth. Our only pull-out service is for counseling. I would say that as somebody who has worked as a special education teacher as well as a general education teacher in this model, it's been really helpful to have the specialized professionals come into the classroom and model strategies that we can use throughout the week. So instead of 30 minutes with the OT and a pull-out session, I was able to see the 30 minutes of direct support that was provided in the classroom connected to the lesson that was already there, and then provide those supports throughout the week. As Vicki mentioned, we have a commitment to universally designed instruction and really meaningful and engaging instruction. We're constantly questioning ourselves about why we're teaching, what we're teaching, and how are we doing it, and does it make it exciting and meaningful for kids, or do we need to make that adjustment? Here's an example of a traditional first grade writing piece. That top piece is a first grader who just was following our state standards and showing an example of an insect and some facts about the insect. And then the piece below is a modified version for a student who had more extensive support needs and was identifying a stick bug and matching that to items found out in nature. At the high school level, well, I would say at all levels, but really at the high school level, we've spent the last couple years really refining the ways we help students with their self-determination and make sure that what we're planning for them in classrooms matches where they want to go into adulthood. So we spend a lot of time on problem solving and decision making and choice making, and really goal setting and self-advocacy and so forth. At our high school level, we have a micro enterprise. I'm just checking my time. Okay. We have a micro enterprise that the students came up with where they're delivering donuts to one another in support of small businesses that they were interested in. So we have connected skills to each of those areas so that students can be really excited about all the parts of their business, but it really matches what kind of business they wanted to design. Our micro enterprises change each semester based on students and their interest. And then in terms of post-secondary opportunities, we've only had one graduating class This will be our second graduating class. They graduate on Friday, and I'm here, but the principal is really excited, and I'm sure she will send them off, and it'll be fantastic. But we really focus on working with families in terms of, do you want to use your self-determination funds to set up programming for your child as they move from 19 to 22, or do you want to look at supports in partnership with us or in partnership with local community colleges and so forth. And that concludes my section. Thank you.
And I know we're out of time, but please, all those are clickable resources, so you'll have that PowerPoint presentation, and of course, we'd love to talk with you outside of this, so please find us at the conference, and we'd love to get together and have a chat about what you're doing in your parts of the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kristen, Victoria, and Shauna, for sharing those fascinating insights into inclusive education in California. A lot of learning there to take away, and I think the important message there was that's where the foundation for successful outcomes later in life is born. So thank you very much for presenting today. That's the end of this session. As always, you'll be able to catch up and review this again on the website and the app. That will be uploaded in the next few days. But thank you very much for coming along to this session.